Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, people of Earth. Welcome to the next Venue webinar. This has been an ongoing series, as you guys know. I hope you've been keeping up on it. We are on webinar 4 of this 5-part series here on Venue 7, this huge software release. And we got a whopper for you today. So just a couple of housekeeping tips here, or housekeeping measures here. Just remember, if you want to ask questions today, do it via the Q&A button. Just press that Q&A button. I got all my buddies in the background here. Ryan, Rob, Chris, Chant, all the guys you know will be back to answer questions about this throughout the webinar. And then they'll pull some of them out so we can ask them live at the end, and I will try to provide some answers for you there, okay? So like I said, this is a whopper of a webinar today. Let me just take care of this 1 second here. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. And this is on automatic delay compensation. Now, you know, for any of you guys that have been following me, doing webinars and seminars and online clinics, etc., you know, this is kind of a passionate topic for me. And I've been working on this for many, many years. And I was just absolutely bowled over to see that it was going to be included in this release. I can tell you without question, this feature alone would warrant its own software release if we were to do it normally. But it's just one of many things that's going to be in Venue 7. So we're going to try to get through it today. Now, just a little bit of a disclaimer, we are still in the beta phase of building this software. What you're going to see is beta software today. You might see things on the console that you have not seen before, etc. It's all still a build in progress. This is not the final version by any stretch. So it may look a little differently once you get the release version of it, but operationally it should be the same here today. All right, so let's get it going here, because we have got an action-packed hour here. I'll say too, there's every chance this is going to go past the hour, so just hang in there with me. So of course, we are on a unified platform, and you all know what that means by now, is that the things that we're going to show you today apply to all the consoles on the unified platform. There's no tiering of consoles here. This is available to all the consoles on the unified platform. All right, so let's start with just a little bit of background on this, because this can be kind of a mysterious subject, and it's even mysterious to teach and demonstrate. So I think I've got some nice ways to show it to you here today. But let's talk about what delay compensation is and how it all kind of got started. You know, this is not a brand new thing to Avid by any stretch of the imagination. You know, the first kind of comprehensive automatic delay compensation model was released to Pro Tools in version 6.4. So think about that. That's pretty far back. I think it was in 2004. Yeah, 2004 that released. And of course, we had a very limited version of automatic delay compensation in the original Venue consoles that released in 2005. And, you know, it was pretty limited in scope in terms of what it could do. And, you know, if you're tempted to think along the lines of, well, why are we just getting to this now? You know, the context for it is, remember in the early Venue consoles, you know, we kind of, I mean, we were using every inch of the DSP in that console, and we just didn't have the headroom to be able to do that in that particular product. But once we got to S6L, we certainly had the processor pass headroom to be able to do it. So here we are in 2020. So why is it important? You know, that's always a question that people ask me. Why do I need to do this, or why do I need to worry about this? And really, I can just sum it up in a couple of just quick mindsets, right? It's always important to remember that digital pathways, when a signal enters to how it exits the console, can take many different paths, and it can take different times to get out of the console. You know, you may have a situation where all of your inputs are not exiting all of the outputs at the same time in digital because of the pathways they've taken. So you need to be able to kind of manage that, or there are times when you might want to manage that. Also, digital processing of the type that we use with S6L, where it's actually on a DSP card connected to an engine, there is throughput processing delay there, right? If I go send and return out to that DSP into a channel, basically inserting a plug-in on an input channel, there's going to be delay that happens as a result of that. So that's a situation, as you guys know, who have followed me in the lab and other areas where I talk about, where you can have inputs leaving the console or leaving a bus even at different times because of this plug-in insert, right? And, you know, we've talked in the past about manually delay compensating, all those kind of things, and the improvement that you can get in sound quality to your shows and your music as a function of it. And, you know, maybe it's even a good time to put this context on it. You know, where I think ADC or delay compensation is really, truly important is when you're mixing music, right? Because there's an impulse content to it. There's a frequency addition content to it that is very, very important to the sound of the music. So, you know, delay compensation or, you know, aligning all these paths is actually pretty important. It'll get you back to what feels very, very much like an analog impulse if you do that, okay? But if you're doing, you know, if you're just doing odd video work, et cetera, it may not be quite as critical to you. That said, there are a lot of workflows that, you know, have to deal with this delay compensation in different ways. And this is what makes it for live sound, makes delay compensation for live sound a very particular thing. You cannot design one that will work for everybody here because of the different constraints that you're going to have to deal with. But, you know, notably here, you know, you might have for monitors, if everybody's on ear monitors, you're not going to want to create a huge buffer in the console that would delay the output to all of the ears, right? The performers are going to have trouble managing that. So you need a very selective ADC process or, you know, even a manual process to be able to manage that. Same thing if you're doing, you know, if you have PA sources that are aligned to acoustic sources, well, if you're changing the throughput of the console, that might impact those alignments. So, you know, you want to be very aware of that. And then, of course, as we make inputs take longer to get out of the console, that can impact video sync, things like that as well. So, you know, this whole time domain, the time, as I've said it for many, many years, in live performance, the time domain is the one you need to get a hold of. It is the one that is the you know, the stick in the spokes, so to speak, for all of our work there, whether it's PA design, mixer design, whatever it's going to be. That is the domain you need to make sure you have good control of, and we're gonna help you do that today with this new feature. Okay, so I'm going to run through a few terms for you here that I need to define for you that I'm going to be using, and these aren't taken out of a textbook or anything. They're just my definitions of these different styles of grouping that we're going to do, et cetera, just to be able to, so you understand the language and can follow along here. So we're going to talk about an input group. An input group meaning it is a submaster, but it is just for a particular set of inputs, right? So maybe you've got a pair of bass drum mics, an input, an inside, an outside, maybe even a trigger. Well, you're going to put those all into one input group and have one fader for it that you can send out to auxes. You can do whatever you need to do with it as one fader. You can equalize it as one fader. Same thing for snare drums, maybe, et cetera. So an input group is a very limited number of groups that run through an audio fader, right? So that is an input group. Second would be a submaster, where you might have a submaster that is for an entire family of instruments, and it might be inputs, it might be input groups, etc., all added together, maybe for your drums, right? Where you would take those two, the kick drum input group, the snare drum input group, and all the rest of your drums, and put it down to one submaster that is assigned to the left-right bus. That's why I try to differentiate between submaster and subgroup. A submaster is assigned to the left-right bus. If we're talking about a master, that can be any number of those things added together, right? Inputs, input groups, and submasters to a master. Now, in our situation, and Rob went through this with you last week a little bit, now that we have all of this bus-to-bus workflow, we can create multiple masters now that would go to a grand master, right? So you could have inputs plus input groups going to a submaster that go to a regular master, I should say, and then off to a grand master, meaning the LR bus. You're going to see all of these workflows in play today, and hopefully I can describe them to you where you understand it. But those are the terms we're going to be using there. An additional one that we need to get through here pretty quickly is the definition of a parallel return versus an insert return and an insert return that is post-fader, right? There are two types of insert returns. And remember, this becomes available now that we can do bus-to-bus, where you can, instead of going from a master, like an aux master, patch to a plugin, out of the plugin, back to another input channel, that would be strictly parallel, right? Well, given that we can take that master, we can actually insert the processing on there, and depending on whether it's pre-fade or post-fade, that fader will act as either the master output or the return, right? So I'll show you that in diagram here, so hopefully it makes a little more sense. So the first thing we'll look at is something like a direct out return, right? This is not a bus-driven parallel setup. This is where we take the direct output of a single channel out to a processor and return it to another channel. This would be a parallel mult by definition, right? The next version of it is one that we've all known for years. That is the bus-fed parallel return, right? So this is where an aux bus is feeding out to a plugin, and the output of that plugin returns to a channel. That is a strict parallel processing model there. But with the new bus-to-bus, we have some other things at our disposal here, right? We can actually now just take the plugin processing and insert it pre-insert, right? In that fashion there. And now the fader, the actual aux master fader, works as a return, right? It works exactly the same as the parallel return, but it works on the aux master, and you could take that aux master and bus it out to other auxiliaries. You could bus it to other groups. You could assign it to the left, right, whatever you need to do. And then a similar version of that is if we insert that same processing post fader, now that same aux master is a master fader, right? It is actually driving level to the plugin, right? So the output of the plugin is actually going to the next stage there. All right, so this is all kind of stuff that came with the bus-to-bus workflow, and it can get really efficient. The nice thing about these insert returns used in this fashion is you don't have to burn up processing channels to be able to use it exactly like you use a processing channel. All right, so really good stuff. All right, let's see. All right, let's get into our first thing here. This is our first diagram. And one of the things that we do with ADC is actually offer you a manual version of it, okay? So as you can see here, we're going to take a number of inputs and that have different plugin formats on it, or different plugin styles on them, post-fader, pre-fader, maybe a combination of post-fader and pre-fader. And as you're going to see, these inputs, because of that different processing, are going to leave, or are going to arrive at the main left, right bus at different times, right? And what we want to do is actually align those things up. We just want to manually align those things up. We don't want to increase the buffer on the console in any way. We're just thinking, you know, okay, I just want to take my drum channels and get those back in alignment, right? So to do that in this version of software, you just simply multi-attention the channels that you want to impact, right? And then you're going to right-click on any one of the channels, and you're going to say align total delay on attention strips, right? So this is just a set of inputs. Keep in mind, you would not want to do the aux master here because, you know, that's, for one thing, you couldn't multi-assign inputs and an aux master, so there is that. But in this situation, once you align these, they will all be aligned to the aux master anyway because they're post-fader, right? So in this situation, you know, you want to keep in mind this is a one-time process. This is a static process, meaning it's not going to automatically manage itself. If you change one of the plugins in this scheme here, you're going to want to redo this and realign the offset. So I'm going to let you have a look at what this looks like here. So let's go, let's see, I got to get the camera turned on. 1 second. Oops, there we go. And we are going to go here and here. All right, so let me show you what I got window-wise there. Obviously, the PowerPoint is just a shrunk-down version of the PowerPoint window. Up in the upper left-hand corner, or upper right-hand corner, that is the actual throughput of the console. And we're going to be constantly looking at that today to just keep an eye on things that change the throughput on the console and things that don't. As you see down in the window, the bottom window here, we have Smart here, and I'm just going to turn off these 4 channels. That's my camera. There we go. And turn them back on one at a time. And I want you to focus in on this area right here. Let's see if I can. So focus in right there just for this time. And as I add channels, you're going to see that they show up at different times, right? Those are different impulses that are going to make their way to the left-right bus, right? So, and keep in mind, I've got this pretty far zoomed in, so this looks probably a lot worse than it actually is. But this is a number of channels where I have one channel that doesn't have the insert and the other three that do, and you can see that they all show up at different times there, right? So what we're going to do is a manual alignment of these channels, right? So I'm going to multi-select these channels, and then I'm going to go up and put my mouse over here and right-click and say align those channels. And voila, you see the impulse come right back together there in SMART, right? In the FFT. Now, if we were to look at, let's go here, let's see if I can get here. There we go. So things are a little sluggish here today. So if you take a look at each one of these channels now, notice that it has used the input delay to align these channels, right? It's found the longest one and used it as its base. And this, in this case, it's a pre plus a post fader insert. That's the longest one, and it's delayed these other channels back to it, right? Now, as I say, this is a static process. You're going to do this on a selected number of inputs. As you change plugins, you're going to need to redo it. If you've got other alignments that you've done, maybe you've done a little bit of offset between an inside bass drum mic and an outside bass drum mic. This is going to erase it, and then you'll come back in and put it back in, right? So this is, like I said, this is much more of a manual process to do this, but this is really important to be able to offer this kind of process, and I'll explain why here. Let's go back to here. Here. So this is especially important for if we're doing monitors, right? That's where this really comes to play, because we wouldn't necessarily want to put in an entire ADC for a monitor console, because it's going to lengthen the time from all of the inputs to the output of the console based on that amount of the longest path, right? So, if you had ear mixes, et cetera, that were going on, you're going to put a lot of time possibly between that person singing and them hearing it in their ears. So you want to be very careful with it. Now, I don't want to discourage you from trying ADC and monitors. It's all about what your artist can tolerate in terms of that offset. It may be where you get such an advantage to it sound quality wise that they might be willing to forego that distance. But, it's just going to be up to you. You're going to have to try it with them and see how they do. But the idea would be, once I have these time aligned, right now it's time aligned up into the aux buses, and the drums are going to be in time with each other, right? So in that situation, right, we would do the same thing, only we would take a limited number of the inputs. We wouldn't necessarily take all of the inputs and align them up, right? Now keep in mind, right? Well, actually, that's all you had to keep in mind. So let's move on to our next example here, and we'll get to what we're going to do next. Let me clear a couple of things out of here. So I'm going to just give you a really quick review of what we've done in the past with ADC. I don't want to spend a ton of time here because it's going to just eat up too much time, but I do want to show this just to set the tone for what's going to go on here. So let's go here. So I'm going to be Mr. Button Pusher today, so hang in there with me. All right, so this is Venue Legacy ADC. Now, in the software, in the options pickoffs page, you're going to see some additional choices now for ADC. And again, remember that this may look a little differently by the time we get to the release version, but right now this is what we have to work with and show. All right, so on the left-hand side of that box up in the top right, you can see what you would recognize as the normal options for Venue. So let's take a look at this here. So what you would want to do, if you would just want to use the normal version of Venue ADC, and we always concentrate on this kind of thing. Maybe you're bringing in a profile show file. Maybe you're coming in with another show file and you're just thinking, dude, I'm not sure about the ADC thing. Let me just operate the way I am right now on the new software. you're going to want to make sure and check use legacy mode delay compensation, right? That's what's going to be in play here. And as we all know, that is geared toward this workflow right here, where you have an input that is assigned to a group, and an input, that same input is also assigned to the left right. So in that situation, if you have this chosen, it's going to align those paths, right? It's going to get those two things in alignment going. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here, and I always try to reinforce this with people because I'm surprised how many people get caught by this. What it doesn't align are other inputs that are assigned directly to the left-right. And there is no plugin alignment at the input stage that happens here, right? If you have plugins on your inputs, et cetera, those are not accounted for in this ADC. So don't get fooled by it. All right. And with regard to aux masters, right, if we had that parallel path and we bring it back to that submaster, which is what you might want to do, or the left-right, and that's not accounted for either, right? That return path is not accounted for either. And not a big deal there if you're using, delays and reverbs, et cetera. They're always going to have a later element to it. You're going to put X amount of samples as kind of a pre-delay in there because of this alignment. But no harm, no foul there, really. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at what we call forced alignment, right? This is Venue Legacy Forced. This kind of came into play where people, started doing their parallel compression a little differently, where they wanted to have a single subgroup that was unprocessed drums and then a second subgroup that was processed drums. Well, remember, for Venue ADC to work automatically in legacy mode, it's looking for that double bus of left-right and a subgroup assigned to the left-right in common. Well, in this situation, we don't have that, right? We've got an input that is going to two subgroups so that we can process one side of it and not the other, and then other inputs that are going out to other subgroups. So if we carry that onto the left-right bus, that is not in alignment until we force it to be so. And the way we force it is we take a channel, an unused channel. We're just going to use it as, we call it a forced aligned channel. I call it FAC. I'm just trying to come up with more acronyms in my life. But if you take this input, it has no signal coming into it. It's not going to send signal anywhere. But if we simply assign it to group 1, group 2, and any other groups we want to do, it will automatically align those things, those groups. But it still will not account for the inputs and the effects returns that are outside of that, right? So we're just aligning those groups. Now, I want to make you aware of this, this FAC process because you're going to use it time and time again, even with automatic delay compensation. And we kind of have to keep it this way to keep it situational, right? There are going to be situations where you might want to use it, others where you might not. You just got to learn how to apply it properly, and hopefully I'm going to get you through that too. All right, so let's see, what do we got next? This is a line. Okay, so we're going to go to our first example here of actual ADC. So let me get it kind of ready to go here. I think I'm there. All right, so let's get to this. Okay, so again, that top window is the throughput of the console, and even though it looks like that's a large window, it's really not. That's about, that entire window is probably left to right, maybe 10 milliseconds. You can see about 2 milliseconds of throughput in the console as it sits right now. And as you can see right now, I've just got some inputs assigned to the left, right. Let's go ahead and blow out the path here so you see what's going on here. So this is going to take and align inputs to the left-right bus and also to the matrices. Okay, it's going to take care of that alignment here. So, and not only is it going to align those inputs, but it's going to align their plug-in offsets as well, right? So remember, I've got channels down here that have different plug-in arrangements on them. And if you look at Smart there, you can see that how they're showing up to the left-right bus right now. You know, it's kind of all over the shop in terms of time. So there would be some challenges to getting these to add up properly. But we're going to go ahead and turn on the ADC now. I'm going to go check that box that is up in the upper right there, and watch the smart screen here, and you'll see it all come together, right? So now, let me get the alignment here. Okay, so there you have it. So I'll just bounce back and forth to show you that this is taking place here, right? So that is aligning all of the inputs. And this is console wide now. This is not just selecting one set of channels, right? This is all inputs on the console are being addressed. All inputs and buses here are being addressed to the left, right, and the matrices here. So pretty cool stuff. This is an amazing, amazing accomplishment for us here at Avid. I'm just so thrilled about this. All right, so we do that. Oops, click the wrong box. And we are in business now, right? And the nice part of it is we can add effects returns if we want to that, and they are aligned to the left-right bus, right? So you'll see me adding in, oops, actually I gotta do this. So the next box, sorry, got out of step there. The next box down says compensate for bus-fed plugins to mains and matrix, right? So that is our parallel returns. I've got a set of those here, parallel return and insert post return here that is being fed by these channels on the left. Now, if I add that additional box, the compensate for bus-fed plugins to mains and matrix, check out what happens, right? Now I'm going to turn up a reverb return and notice the magnitude trace is adding. There we go. So any one of these effects returns that I add to it, you can see are adding, and the impulses are in time, they're in phase. So, you know, the kind of the moral of the story here is if you want to absolutely be the most time coherent without any chance of really making any boo-boos, assign all your inputs and effects returns directly to the left-right bus. You know, if you do that, you can use, you know, you can use these parallel returns as mults. You can use them as parallel compressions, anything you want to do and be totally in phase all the way through the left-right bus. No fuss, no muss, right? It's just absolutely fantastic. We've been waiting for this for a long time, and man, it is delivering big time here. Okay, so that is align inputs to mains and matrices checked, along with align bus-fed plugins, meaning those parallel returns, to the mains and matrices as well. Now notice up in the upper right, once we did that, we've extended the length of the console, right? If I take these back off now, watch that top display, and it's going to shorten back up. We've actually added throughput to the console there. So, you know, you're going to want to consider that when you're building, right? This should be a reminder to you, get as much of your routing, get as much of this done as early in your process as you can, especially if you're going to use outputs from your console to do acoustic alignments, propagation alignments, right? Between acoustic sources and PA. Okay, let's go to our next one. I'm doing pretty good time-wise here. I gotta go here. All right, so let's look at our next. Oops, I have one little thing up there. So that is, yeah, that's going to align all of those at that point. So I finish up my PowerPoint there. All right, let's go to our next build. All right, so now let's put some subgroups in play and see what happens here. All right, so let me get here. So in this situation, we're going to have the two checkboxes checked, and we're going to just add some discrete submasters here. We're going to have 4 inputs that are going to one submaster, another input that's going to a second master, and you know this can be any number of inputs to these. There's just keep in mind it's just discrete submasters here that we're going to use, right? And those submasters are going to be assigned to the left-right. We're also going to create a parallel path that is going to come into an effects return and is also going to be assigned to the left-right. Okay. Now keep in mind, this is one of the rules that I want you to try to buy into and keep in mind here. And I kind of, in my mind, I kind of think of it as crossing boundaries, right? So notice that those 3 inputs that are feeding that aux master, right? If you can avoid sending things to that auxiliary that are outside of that submaster, right? You wouldn't necessarily, like if this is all drums, you don't necessarily want to be sending a guitar input to that aux master because it's in a different submaster, right? I know that gets complicated thinking about it, but you want to not cross boundaries here. If you do that, you'll have a much better chance of not disrupting the ADC and making it do something weird. So keep like instruments in like auxes in like subgroups or submasters in this case, okay? All right, so let's take a look at this. And actually, I'm going to go on to the next one just to save just a little bit of time here, because the next portion of this is doing parallel compression, and we'll just show it all at once here. But in this situation, what's going to happen is the alignment is going to take place, and here's where we're going to need that forced channel, right? We're going to need to assign a channel to all three of those submasters or more, however many submasters there are, and then align those with those inputs, right? So remember, the submasters are not in alignment until you force them to be. Also notice that this is the last stage of grouping before the left-right bus. And you're going to see a common theme as we go through this, that's always the set of groups that you're going to need to force align, okay? So remember, it's just that input channel. It can be any channel on the console that it can assign to those buses, all right? Once you're there, you're in alignment. All right, so what happens with parallel compression, right? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. One other thing to note here, right? We have our aux master returning to the left, right here, and this is completely in phase, right? This is all good. But if we take that aux master and include it in our submaster, and we may very well want to do this for delays and reverbs, you know, for vocals, for drums, whatever, because then we've created a stem mix that is actually wet. It actually has our processing in it. We have no level offset between the submaster and the left-right for the effects return. So if we do this, if we take that effects return and return it to the submaster that is using the inputs that are going to that aux, this will not be in alignment. But the thing is, it is coming in late, right? Which is fine. You're going to be just fine with that, with reverbs and delays being a few samples late here. Totally okay. Not perfectly in phase. You couldn't use it as a mult where you're going to add it with the original signals, but you can add it into your submaster here and create a wet stem very effectively here. You just have to understand that return is not totally in time with the subgroup, okay? But no worries. All right, so let's go to parallel compression now, and I'll show you this one on the console and with the FFT. So in this situation, we're going to have a set of drum inputs that are going to go to two submasters, just like we normally do for parallel, right? Where we have one that is all drums, one that is processed drums. We're going to have another input, maybe it's cymbals, whatever, that is also going to go to that all drums submaster. And then we're going to have our other inputs go out to whatever it's going to be, right? And all of those are going to go to a main left-right bus. This is a very common workflow. And as we know, and as we have known in the past, we can't get this in alignment until we do the FAC, right? Now, the cool part about it is with the ADC, with the automatic delay compensation, all of the plugins are accounted for there, right? All of those inputs are aligned to these groups now. It's hard for me to convey how important this is to do and how much better it's going to sound if you do this. Okay, but once we do the FAC here, then we get the groups aligned as well, right? So let me show you this in FFT. Go back to this. And if I can get over here to turn on the stuff. Okay. And I think I got to have this. All right, so as you can see here, even though it's kind of hard to tell on the screen, there are two impulses showing up there at the impulse window up there at the top of Smart, right? Notice our throughput has changed a little bit. So all I'm going to do here to get this cleaned up now, and keep in mind, if we took off the ADC, how messy this would be, right? If we did this, then it all kind of goes crazy. So this is our first, this is with the checkboxes checked, the two checkboxes in pickoffs and delay compensation. Now we're going to do that third piece of alignment, which is a forced align channel for the groups. So I'm going to, here are my three groups. I'm going to take my forced align channel and I'm going to assign it to all of those, and boom, there we go. So just Let's realign the computer now, and you can see that all of these things are adding together there, right? I'll just pull them all up one at a time here so you can see it's just perfect addition of all of these things, right? So that is, that workflow is probably going to be used more than any, I think, in the initial days of the ADC, and it works just absolutely fantastic. Now, same thing applies here for the effects return, right? If we take that effects return and we assign it, we assign it to either the group or the left-right, it's going to have a different time relationship, right? To the left-right bus, it's in time. To the group, it's going to be a little bit late. Maybe we'll solve that problem someday. All right, so let's go back to this. We will go to our next demonstration here. All right, so that is just a single tier of submasters going to the left-right. All right, so let's start adding some input groups now and see what happens there, right? So in this situation, we're going to take some inputs and we're going to create a group with it. Maybe that's 2 bass drums, whatever. We're going to send that to a submaster. And we're also going to send an input directly to the submaster, add those 2 things there. Maybe those are our drum channels. We're also going to send any number of inputs to another input group. These would be like inputs, right? Maybe it's, you know, all the mics on a snare drum, you know, whatever you wanted it to be. Maybe it's all your tom-toms. Then we're going to take another input and send it to that input group, and that's going to go to a second submaster. Notice the second submaster has a plugin on it. Then we're going to take both of those submasters to the left-right bus, right? That would be a normal workflow. We're also going to create an aux mix now. Now look at this aux mix. Now this is where it gets interesting, right? In this situation, let's take those 2 bass drums up at the top, for example, right? In that situation, you wouldn't want to dial the input group or the input sources, the actual inputs themselves, into the aux. You would want to take advantage of that input group where you've combined them together, you've processed them there, you maybe have equalized them as a composite, and send that to your auxiliary, right? So that it's dynamically accurate with the inputs. So you would want that to go to the aux master. This is a function of that bus-to-bus workflow that we have now. And then you might want one of the other inputs that actually is going to the submaster, directly to the submaster in that aux as well, which you see here, right? Well, if that's assigned to the left-right, we're all good, right? It's going to be in time. If we assign it to the submaster, oops, let me do this part first. If we assign it to the submaster, then it's going to be a little bit late, but that's okay again, as long as it's delay or reverbs, right? It's going to be okay there. All right, so there is using input groups to be able to do the same thing. And, you know, all of these parallel compression schemes apply if you're doing them at the submaster level as well. I don't think I have that demonstration here, but, you know, just to save time, I think you get the concept now that you've seen it a couple of times, right? Okay, so let's look at that. Maybe we'll take a look at that one. We're doing okay time-wise here, so let's go back to the camera. All right. All right, so here is our inputs going to, let me turn the effects returns off. So this is our inputs going, all of the inputs going out to these input groups. Am I on the right presets? Let me just double check. I don't think I am. Here, this is the one. There we go. All right, so these are our inputs going to 2 input groups that are feeding submasters, right? These are feeding submasters that are going directly to the left-right master. Once we align for the change in throughput, you can see that all of that shows up in phase, right? Even the effects processor, right? Notice that magnitude is changing positively there. That is perfectly in phase, no additional impulse. So reverb process is going there as well. If I go to, I'll just do it here so I can prove it. If I take the effects return out of left-right bus and I assign it to the group, the submaster, I should say, that has its sources in it, you can see that it comes up a little bit late there, but that's okay as long as this is a reverb or a delay. If it's a mult, then you're going to want to do it directly to the left-right bus to keep it in phase, right? If you're adding distorted drums to your source drums, etc., you're going to want to do that to the left-right bus to keep it in phase. Okay. All right. Let's go back to this. All right, let's go on to our next one here. Let's get back to this. And this is what I got to do. Yeah, there we go. All right, so our next one, it'll help if I do the whole PowerPoint. All right, so our next one is submasters with dual masters, right? This is a very interesting workflow. This is one I've kind of life hacked into my show files for years using matrices and other stuff to be able to do this. But now that we got bus to bus, this gets so easy to do. It's not even funny. So in this situation, we're going to have inputs that are going to go to submasters, right? To create our offsets, our volume offsets. And then depending on whether the subgroups or the submasters are instruments or vocals, we're going to send them on to a separate master, right? So our instruments are going to go up to an instrument master. Our vocal submaster is going to go to a vocal master. Now you might be thinking, well, why do I need my vocals to go to a vocal master? Well, you might have other like backing vocal groups. You might have choir groups, etc. And you'd want to keep those all in one master volume, right? It might have a pastor, whatever you wanted to do, keep it in your vocal, in your master. And in addition, or actually from there, we would send it right on to the left-right bus. So now the left-right bus is considered a grand master, while you have two masters of the submasters, right? That are culminations of inputs. So inputs to submaster, submaster to master, master to grandmaster. Okay? Pretty cool stuff. And all of this is in time, of course, right? So we even have the possibility now to add another input master, if you wanted to do it, to be able to do true, like New York style parallel compression on your instrument master there. It's often referred to as a P bus. I think I've heard it called that a few times. I think Andrew Sheps uses that term P bus sometimes. So in that situation, you could create a P bus very easily there, and that is all in time. And that is all accomplished with those two checkboxes up in the deal. Now, take a look at this. This is the interesting part. We still need the forced align channel. Where does it need to happen? It needs to happen at the last stage of grouping, right? So if we do the FAC here, now all of those are in alignment before you get to the grandmaster, all right? Really, really good stuff there. Now, it's worth noting here, and because we put it in Venue 7 now, that you have the ability to parallel compress on every output now if you want to do it on board of the console. There is a mix feature for the compressor at every stage of the console now. So, if you want to do parallel at any point in this without actually having to create the second bus, you can do it. But if you want to do New York style parallel compression, or typically as it's called, where you're doing equalization, compression, and tape saturation or something like that and adding it back in, then you would want to do the dual bus thing here. All right. So let's switch over to, let's see what I got here. Actually, I'm going to go to the next one, and we'll just do this all at once just to save just a little bit of time here. So you see it here. This is a 2-tier set of masters. We're going to go to a 3-tier set of masters now. I can get the thing to switch. All right, so we're going to add some input groups into this now. So again, this all plays into the bus-to-bus working flow that we talked about. So we're going to create our input groups, bass drums, snare drums, toms, whatever you want to do there. We're going to send that to a submaster. We're going to take other inputs and send them to that submaster, then onto a second submaster. Our vocals, we're going to take those up to our instruments groups, our instrument masters, I should say, and our vocal masters. And then we're going to send that on to the left-right bus. And even add in the third bus if we want to do it, if we wanted to do the P bus there, right? Okay, once we do that, yeah, all good. All we have to do is put the forced align channel there, and you are golden. Now, same thing applies for our effects returns here, right? Effects returns want to be included to the left-right bus, or they want to be included in the submaster that has common inputs to that aux, right? So if we have drums going to an aux, we want that return to only be included with the drums in their submaster, right? That's kind of the rule you want to follow there. All right, so let's take a look at this. Did I draw that in here? I'm not gonna lie, I've done so many PowerPoints over the last little bit of time here. So let's go here. Let me get this one ready to show. All right, so on the console here, we have the inputs going to input groups that are going to the 3 submasters that are going to the two masters pre-grandmaster, right? Submasters, masters, off to the left-right bus. Okay, so as you can see, it's a little out of whack. The impulses are actually pretty close together there, but you can see that it's there's comb filtering between the 2 master buses there. So all I'm going to do here is go to my align channel, and I'm just going to align these 2, force align these 2 buses, right? Our two masters. So once I do that, back in alignment. And I got that back. 1 second for me. Just clean it up and make it pretty. Oops. There we go. Don't worry about the little swoop up on the phase trace there. That's just the computer being out of alignment with the desk here. So, but as you can see, that's all one impulse there, all happening at the same time. That's all sources gone. Now, of course, if we were trying to do this without delay compensation, remember what it would look like, right? It would look like that, right? We would have all kinds of source discrepancy, arrival discrepancy at the output, right? So once we just hit the 2 align buttons, boom, all back together, really great ignition. Notice that the throughput is changing up there, right? I'll take it back out again. That's the normal, our base throughput, but once we align for the longest paths here, it's going to increase our delay output. Now, keep in mind that this is a dynamic process. This is not a static process, meaning as I change plugins in the rack while I'm building, it's going to automatically do this, right? It's automatically going to compensate for it. There's nothing else that you need to do in terms of it keeping that impulse right at the output stage. Okay, so really cool stuff. It's just going to just relieve so much mental stress for you, I think, once we get it all going here. So notice that this has effects returns in it as well. I've got the effects returns up. I've got both a parallel return and an insert return here up, and everything is still in phase. Okay. All right, let's go to our last one. I can't believe I'm going to get this inside an hour. Let's see here. All right, so I'm going to go back here. And we are going to go to the next box here. Let's go back to this. Go back to this. All right, so notice up in the box, up in the right-hand corner, there's also a choice that says align all matrices. All right, so let's take a look at what that is going to do for us. All right, so let's go back to this original drawing that we had earlier where I talked about aligning to the matrices. Well, what this accounts for, you know, in the first 2 boxes there where it says align all input channels to mains and matrices, take that literally, right? It's aligning the inputs to the matrix and the mains to the matrix, as you see here. And then if you check the 3rd box, it adds the bus-fed plugins into that as well. Right, but what it doesn't account for necessarily is if we have a lot of plugins on our matrices. Maybe these matrices are driving portions of the PA, whatever it could be, whatever your reason for having different processing on different matrices. Well, obviously in this situation, those matrices are not going to be in alignment. There's going to be offset because of that. All right, so let me get this set up before I can show this. Here, there we go. All right, so once we click this button, it should bring all these matrices into alignment. It should account for the longest plugin arrangement and delay everything back to that. All right, so let's take a look at that. on our screen. So I'm going to go here and here. So what you see there, I'll just mute all these so you can kind of see them all showing up here. If you notice, this is a multi-input window for Smart, right? So I'm looking at 6 different matrix outputs all at the same time here, right? And you can see that there's offset built into them. There's wildly different plugin arrangements on these. I've made it to kind of exaggerate it here, right? So remember, we can only see one at a time in terms of impulse. So if I go around the impulses here, you can see that they're going to move around. And you see the net phase, if we were to add them all together, would be atrocious, right? So if we go and hit, I'm going to click the box now. So if we click the box, what's going to happen is all of those are going to align, right? So let me get over there and click that box. And boom, there you go. All of those alignment, all of those matrices now exit the console at the same time, right? Really important workflow, obviously, for PA work, if you're doing different plugins on your outputs, etc. So really important one there. Okay, so that is ADC in a nutshell. There obviously today, we only had time to cover the front of house workflow, etc. There are tons of different workflows and tons of different ramifications that we need to consider when you're doing ADC. Am I doing front of house? Okay. Am I doing monitors? Okay, well, I might have a different ADC requirement. Am I doing front of house and monitors? That might have a different ADC requirement. Am I mixing for stream right to video? That might have a different ADC requirement. All of these things. So it's important that you understand how it works and what the expectation of it is when you click that box. And hopefully it will make everything in your life better. All right, so let's go back to this. And we'll finish out the PowerPoint here. All right, so let's talk about some best practices for use with ADC. Okay, so here we go. First and foremost, much like I actually relate this very much to using snapshots in some ways in terms of mindset. Avoid the temptation to simply turn it all on and just think, well, it'll be better if I have it all on. That's not necessarily going to be the case because it's situational, right? In live sound, it's situational, no doubt about it. And you want to make sure you have an expectation for what's going to happen when you click that box. So I encourage you to dig in a little bit on it. Also, develop a plan for your routing and execute it as early in the system setup process as you can. As you saw, I've got throughput that can be changing as I'm building, right? It also speaks to working with templates if you can do it. If you can't work with a template, get as much of your routing accomplished as early as you can in your process, right? And be really particular about your routing. Be very careful with it because, a misroute can kind of disrupt the ADC, so be careful. Secondly, and I've been preaching this for a long time, even before there was ADC, but ADC actually reminds us that this is a good thing to do, is pick an approach, right? Pick whether you're going to work inputs directly to the left-right bus or you're going to incorporate grouping, input groups, submasters, master scheme, pick one. Try not to mix them. That's where ADC can get you in trouble a little bit at times if you're not careful. So try to pick one of those approaches and go with it. It'll make your routing a lot more logical too if you do it. Yeah, so pick one or the other is kind of what I'm getting at there. Now you can't, where you can, actually maybe I should clarify that just a little bit. If you're mixing music, try to pick one or the other for your music, right? Either mix all your music to the left-right bus from the input stage or use a group path with no music inputs going directly to the left-right bus. Now, does that mean I can't assign inputs to the left-right bus? Of course you can, but I would make it outside the realms of the music. Like if you've got hosts or music, walk-in music, or video roll playbacks, things like that. Those can easily go to the left-right with no penalty, right? No confusion to the ADC. So not a problem there. But try to compartmentalize it a little bit best you can. And as I say, be certain with your routing. Some inadvertent routing, especially in the parallel paths, can cause you some problems. It can disrupt things a little bit. And we are to the end. Wow, look at that, man. I think I'm right on 1 hour. I did not think that was going to be possible. Who knows? Maybe I actually left out an entire section. I don't know. But we will move on to questions and answers now. Let me see if I can find my friends here. If we're still online.
Hey, Robert.
Hey there.
So we do have a few. I think you melted everybody's brains for the most part.
I knew it was coming.
But
I'm going to stop the share here. Hang on one second.
Oh, good. One thing I'd just like to point out is, and Ryan can confirm one way or the other, if you load any show file prior to 7, the legacy mode delay compensation will already be checked there. So you actually have to go and intentionally turn that off.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right, Chad. Thank you.
Cool. So let's just get through a couple of these if you're ready.
Let me take a deep breath. Okay.
What's the base throughput time, input to output with no processing?
It depends on where you output. If you're outputting from a stage rack, it's a little different than if you're outputting directly from the console. And it's probably worth noting, I hope you guys picked up on it, I didn't mention it, that hardware inserts are not included in the ADC, right? And that is specifically for that reason right now. It's not to say that we won't do that at some point. Hopefully we'll get that in there at some point. But you know, that insert point can have a different throughput depending on whether you're using a stage rack or the console to do it, right? So, you know, it would be really tough to deal with that. But hopefully we'll develop it in there at some point. That said, the shortest throughput, I believe, is on the console, and it's just under 2 milliseconds. The output from stage rack, I don't remember the exact numbers, so forgive me. I want to say it's like 2.1 input to output of a stage rack.
Ryan could confirm that. And the second part of that, is the throughput time the same for the left-right as it is the aux buses?
It's a great question, and I knew there was going to be questions there that I don't have a firm answer on. That would just take some measurement. Maybe Ryan's got some insight on it, but I would guess that it's going to be if we have that ADC box checked.
So, yeah, basically it's going through a path. You have roughly the same time there. And, you know, your numbers aren't far off. We retest this over and over and over again because we constantly optimize the software. And as we make things a little bit, you know, better, we have been reducing the total throughput time of the console as each software version has come out. So yeah, we're in the 2 millisecond range, and we do typically test that in-house as a input channel to an aux to kind of emulate, you know, the monitor workflow, because of course total throughput is the most relevant in that case. So yeah, your numbers are pretty close there.
Cool. Question number 2. What does P, or small p with a capital F, stand for on your drawings there?
Pre-fade insert versus post-fade insert. Post-fade being capital P, pre-fade being small p.
Cool. All right. 2-part question here. Will the input ADC also work for third-party AAX plugins inserted, or just the Avid plugins?
It works for any AAX plugin that is operating on the console, including Waves. Right.
So that was the second part. Does it account for ADC with the Wave sound grid?
Yeah, yeah. And keep in mind, it would on our console, right? Because we use a Waves card. Now, if you were using, you know, an MGP or whatever that box is called, I can't remember now.
MG, yeah.
Yeah, or if you were using MADI to do those inserts, then remember that's a hardware insert and not going to be accounted for in the ADC. But our Waves card accounts for that.
Cool. Yeah. What's the maximum delay the console can apply through ADC?
What's the longest plugin you can come up with?
Cool. So it will accommodate for any length.
Yeah, as far as I know, I can't imagine there would be any boundary on it. It's just math at some point.
The limitations are pretty silly. It's basically a max of 2 full seconds that the console can compensate for, and it's all kind of in different places. I actually answered that question privately to the guy who asked it because it is kind of complicated, but yeah, it's 2 seconds would be the total max that it could handle. Right, and you'd have to do a lot of crazy paths to hit 2 total seconds of latency.
If you're doing 2 seconds of latency in the console, I would like to see why. Not judging.
That's the nice way to say it.
Not judging.
So there is a flurry of very similar questions, and I think they can all be pretty much summed up with this. With forced ADC, do you assign the forced channel to only the groups you want aligned, or to those groups as well as the left-right?
If you have our ADC turned on, you only ever need to assign it to the groups. Assign it to the left-right will have no impact because left-right channels are already aligned there.
Okay, and then there's a kind of a second part that is similar to this. Just to clarify, will we need to do multiple FACs, one for each of the subgroups as well as the master, or that the master that is pre-grandmaster?
Yeah, it's the last grouping path before the grandmaster, before the left-right bus. It's always going to be that last path.
Cool. And that's pretty much it, other than when is 7 going to be available?
Are we announcing the date? We've announced the date, right?
Yeah, I don't think we have a firm
I just keep telling people early December.
Okay, early December. We're going to stick on that. Okay. I don't want to break any rules there. All right, so guys, I will say to you this as well. If you all know that I do this webinar regularly called The Lab, right? So that's where we're going to go tunnel down on this, right? So if I'll probably pick labs where we'll do nothing but look at monitor mixing workflows. Another lab where we do nothing but front of house and, monitor, front of house plus monitor mixing workflows, stuff like that. So we'll really tunnel down on it. Obviously, this is the wrong setting for that. We don't want to do that here. Otherwise, we'd be here for hours like we are in the lab. And we'll take care of it there. We'll really tunnel down on this. So save your questions, sign up for the lab. And as soon as I kick those back off, after I get all this work done, I hope to kick that back off, hopefully mid-December. And we'll start digging in on all that stuff. But if that's the end of the questions,
I did actually get one more question by text, which you may choose to push this into the lab. But I was asked, how does this affect the bridge channel concept that you do regarding parallel processing of drums, et cetera? Yeah,
well, here's the answer to that question. I don't know yet. I haven't had a chance to dig in and find out yet. But I will say this, it simplifies it dramatically. Because we have bus to bus now, right? So, in the past, I've created that as a pure parallel path. And I think in the future, I won't do that. I probably will just use an aux return, kind of in pre-fade mode and just use pre-fade inserts on it because I can assign that aux anywhere now. Remember that part of my agenda for creating that bridge channel and those paths was to be able to get them up to an auxiliary, especially for drums, like for parallel drums. I wanted to be able to get compressed drums to the auxiliary, right? So I don't really have a worry about that now. I can do that a lot of different ways. But it's a great question. It's a great topic. We will definitely pick a lab and dig in on, using some of the bridge concepts and how many of those we can eliminate now with this ADC. So pretty exciting stuff there for sure.
Cool. We should also mention Rob and Chris's webinar coming up.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, Rob and Chris are back next. Is it next Wednesday?
Yep.
Hi, Rob here. Yes, how you doing, man? I was also, my head is officially blown up, and I've been going through this with you for a week. So well done.
Thank you, man.
Great explanation. December the 2nd is we're going to show the Milan 192 card. It's a new option card using Milan AVB. Chris is going to have 3 desks, all connected through Luminix switches, gain sharing. Each of those 3 desks will have a Milan card. We'll connect to third-party devices, Acoustics, DMB. We're going to use a Hive Av deck to bus kind of tie lines between the desks, to bus inputs from third parties into the switches and then to all of the desks. So yeah, everything Milan related, how we're going to get AVB from our SXL environment out into the world and between the desks. So super exciting. I don't know about you, but this is,
it's so super cool, man.
Being able to send stems around and comms over just with a bit extra bit of Cat5 through the same switches even. So yeah, spectacular.
Just the whole comms situation with that is just going to be spectacular.
Yeah.
Hopefully you never have to say, turn on the talkback,
or just running big bits of copper around or any of that stuff is just.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's in and out of stage boxes to do some effects returns to the monitor desk or something. All done. It's all beautiful. Chris is going to put his big brain around it and explain it. I'm going to just stand in the background and make snipey remarks probably. But
so no change for you then?
No change. Same as ever. So December the 2nd, same time as this one was. Everything Milan AVB will, you know, not just us, but how we connect on to third parties and how we connect to the Hive AvDeck, what you might want to look at before we do.
Should we put out a little teaser for Venue for the 6th webinar we're going to add?
Yeah, I should, man. Exciting as well.
So, you know, if Venue 7 wasn't big enough for you with 5 webinars, we're actually going to add a 6th webinar, because there's going to be one more addition in Venue 7, and that is USB playback and record is going to be available on S6L now. So I'm going to take you through that one a week after Rob and Chris's webinar on Milan. So look for information on that. That's going to be, it's not in the normal mailer because it's a late edition. So just look in the social channels and the other areas for information on that.
December the 9th, I think that's going to be, Rob.
December the 9th. Yeah, thank you, Rob. Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, so on that note, we'll pull the ripcord here. Thank you very much for attending, guys. We'll see you out in all the social channels out there. Stay safe. As they say right now, test negative, stay positive. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you. Bye-bye.